The Muppets are an American ensemble of puppet characters is the first description of Jim Henson's creations that you'll find on Google. The characters and ideas behind them are of course fundamentally American. Henson was born in Mississippi and therefore so was Kermit the Frog, and the whole Muppet movie is about their desire to live the American dream in Hollywood, which in the film the Muppets succeed in doing. But in real life, Jim Henson was effectively rejected by America, and it was none other than Great Britain where he and the Muppets got their first big break in showbiz. Throughout the 1970s, following the success of Sesame Street, Jim Henson was on a mission to create his own puppet variety show that wasn't just aimed at kids. Now, apparently this was no easy task, as American network ABC rejected 2 of his pilots, in the form of The Muppets Valentine Show in 1974 and The Muppet Show Sex and Violence in 1975. This perhaps surprisingly crude title reinforced Henson's mission, but probably didn't offer much encouragement for the TV executives, who just couldn't see how a puppet show could appeal to anyone else but children. So later that year, Henson devised a third pitch, this time targeting CBS, proposing a television program simply titled The Muppet Show.
The United States of America needs The Muppet Show, and you should buy this show. The Muppets will be famous, and CBS will be famous because we'll have a hit show on our hands.
CBS passed up the opportunity to produce the show, as did every other major network in the US. The only individual who actually took serious interest in the pitch was a certain proprietor, producer, and not to mention lord, by the name of Lou Grade, owner of the British commercial station ATV, part of the ITV network. He saw potential in television programs featuring puppets after successfully backing the works of Gerry Anderson, such as Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet. But there was something about Jim Henson's approach to puppetry that stood out among the rest.
I knew he was talented based on what I saw on the screen, because it needed some kind of genius to figure out how to do those things.
Grade offered to produce and distribute The Muppet Show on one condition, that it was made at his UK studios. This would be quite the upheaval for everyone involved, but it was deemed to be the right move, and Henson accepted Grade's offer.
Can you believe it was 1976 when The Muppet Show first came to British TV? That's right. And one of the things that really helped it work was that we all got on a plane and came over to England to make it.
So it may surprise you to know that all 5 seasons of The Muppet Show, totaling 120 episodes, were actually filmed in ATV Elstree Studios in Borehamwood, just north of London. A far cry from the lavish depictions of Hollywood in the movies, it's almost fitting that the Muppets' quest for stardom landed them in such a seemingly unremarkable location, with the rundown studios in the 2011 film not being too far off.
I don't know if people know this, but of course the original Muppet Show was made here for ITV back in the 1970s. Did you shoot it over here?
Actually, it was shot in Elstree, in a little town we used to lovingly call Boring Wood, but it was Borehamwood.
Despite this, Elstree turned out to be pretty state-of-the-art and provided the space needed to realise the iconic Muppet Theatre, which Henson based off Old English Music Hall, an aesthetic from the early Victorian era, with the set being used to film the show for the next 5 years. It goes without saying that The Muppet Show was a massive hit, drawing in over 14 million viewers every Sunday tea time on ITV in the UK.
Ho, ho, ho! This is Santa Frog, telling you to be sure to stay tuned to ITV for the rest of this evening.
Liberace adds a glitter to The Muppet Show tomorrow afternoon at 5:30.
It was only then that the very same American network executives who had turned Henson down came crawling back for the rights to air the show. This was arranged via ITC Entertainment, with The Muppet Show being broadcast in over 100 countries around the world, all from this one building in England known as Studio D. As recent as 2014, you could still observe Statler and Waldorf's balcony, but the studios have just been sold, and I quote, "Sadly, it does seem likely that everything on the northeast side, including Studios C and D, will be demolished." Where have I heard that before?
An evil oil baron wants to tear down our old Muppet studio.
In 2 weeks, we tear this place to the ground and start drilling.
A plaque outside the studios and Star on the Ground are dedicated to Jim Henson, whilst this mural painted on a brick wall nearby, topped off with a few black bin bags there, marks Boreham Wood as the unlikely birthplace of the Muppet Show. As a byproduct of the show being produced in the UK, the episodes would have to be 2 minutes longer than in the United States, simply due to the UK having less advertisements. This meant that for each episode of the show, a segment had to be cut from the American broadcasts. These segments, totaling at around 50 minutes of content per season, would become known as UK spots, and often featured British songs, bearing in mind that the majority of the audience would consist of those watching in the UK.
Maybe it's because I'm a Londoner that I love London town.
As for America, these exclusive spots would eventually see the light of day as part of various compilations and alternate cuts of the show, before they were eventually restored in full for the Muppet Show DVD box sets and later appeared on Disney+. Whilst the vast majority of guests on the show were American, the location meant the show was easily accessible to British stars, with the likes of Julie Andrews, John Cleese, Bruce Forsyth, Elton John and Roger Moore making appearances over the years. But of course, the show's DNA remained American, with the majority of Muppet characters and their respective performers being from the States. It's where they grew up and naturally drew inspiration from when coming up with ideas for the show. There are notable exceptions to this, however, with the character of Uncle Deadly being performed by Jerry Nelson with an evil English accent derived from Shakespearean theatre.
You Muppets have taken over my theatre, my home. Years ago, I was a great actor.
Whilst Henson's right-hand man, Frank Oz, was actually born in England but remained for only 6 months before relocating to America. By 1977, the Muppets were so high profile that they were invited to feature at the Royal Variety Performance that year. Her Majesty the Queen allegedly enjoyed the Muppets' appearance, making a point to personally congratulate Jim Henson and his team upon the show's conclusion.
Thank you to the Muppets, to Jim Henson, the hairy one, known to you as Kermit the Frog, and Frank Oz, this piggy.
There to witness this historic meeting was none other than Lou Grade, without whom it likely would never have happened. This then kickstarted a trend of the Muppets appearing at Royal Variety performances, which occurred on 3 further occasions. Not to mention, the royal encounter planted the seed of an implied long-standing friendship between the Queen of England and Kermit the Frog. The Muppets continued to mingle with the stars as they became household names across the UK, notably making live appearances on talk shows such as Parkinson in 1978.
I know some things about you.
Well, like what?
Your legs.
Legs?
You have great legs.
As they crept further into the public consciousness, so much so that the term Muppet became commonly used as a light-hearted insult in Britain, and remains as such to this day.
The rest of the day is going to be bloody miserable, you muppet!
Derived from the character's airheaded stupidity on screen. Muppet Mania culminated in 1979 with the release of their first feature, The Muppet Movie, which was once more financially backed by Lou Grade. So it only made sense that in the movie, the powerful, intimidating figure who grants the Muppets their rich and famous contract was named Lou Lord.
Oh, hi there. I'm going to audition for Lou Lord.
As a tip of the hat to the producer that made it all possible. The character was portrayed by Orson Welles, who met the real deal when Grade visited the set. Henson himself eventually moved to the UK in 1979 and remained until 1982, as denoted by a blue plaque which now adorns his former home, 50 Downshire Hill in Hampstead, London. This was opposite his famous creature shop and allowed him to oversee the production of The Muppet Show, in addition to their second feature, The Great Muppet Caper, which was actually set in London among many other productions.
Whatever you are, whoever you are, welcome to Great Britain.
Great Britain? We're actually in Great Britain.
Oh no, we'll never get to England now.
When Henson returned to America, his English home was kept as a base should he wish to visit, until his untimely passing in 1990. It's well documented that a memorial service took place in New York, although a second was also held at St. Paul's Cathedral in London for his British friends and colleagues. It was there that, in a eulogy, Frank Oz reflected on Henson's love of London and the appreciation that he had for his time spent there, remarking that if he was feeling burnt out from work, Henson would go for a stroll through the grassland at Hampstead Heath and taking a view of the city from Parliament Hill, where he had a bench dedicated to the late Muppet designer Don Saleen, with Henson's own name later being added. The relationship between the Muppets and the UK remained strong after Henson's passing, with one of their most beloved productions, 1992's The Muppet Christmas Carol, being filmed in Shepperton Studios and, of course, set in Victorian England. Not to mention it happens to star British film icon Sir Michael Caine.
Humbug.
Kermit would go on to address the Oxford Union in 1994.
It's a daunting prospect for Kermit, but perhaps the busts of past figures like Edward Heath and the Earl of Stockton will smile encouragingly on his efforts tonight. Or will they simply wonder what on earth a frog is doing standing on that historic podium?
He performed a duet with Kylie Minogue in 2001.
I still feel the same,
especially for you.
And in 2002 was a guest of honour at the Queen's Golden Jubilee, a celebration of her 50th year as Queen. The Felt Amphibian joined a prestigious line of guests, with the likes of Paul McCartney, Mick Jagger, Ozzy Osbourne and Tom Jones in attendance. Now being performed by Steve Whitmire, Kermit finally got to meet Queen Elizabeth 25 years after his creator did originally. In the 2011 movie, a photograph on the wall of Kermit's old office depicts a meeting with a much younger Queen Elizabeth. Whilst the image was in fact fabricated for the movie, it seems to act as a homage to when Jim Henson and his puppeteers actually did meet Her Majesty at the Royal Variety Performance back in the 70s. This also adds to the mythology of Kermit supposedly having met the long-reigning monarch at various points throughout history. Something that was reinforced when Kermit was asked what his career highlight had been that same year. To which he replied, "We've worked with all kinds of big stars, but one of my all-time favourites was when I met the Queen." I mentioned earlier how the term Muppet is British slang for a fool, idiot or plonker, which I think is what made the Man on Muppet song from the same film so popular here.
You need to decide, are you a man or a Muppet?
It makes the song work outside of the context of the film's narrative, adding an additional comedic layer that I didn't even consider wouldn't be present in other countries.
If I'm a man, that makes me a Muppet of a man. A Muppet of a man.
The song made its way onto the UK singles charts, whilst Mana Mana also had a resurgence in popularity, being sang by various British celebrities as part of that year's Children in Need charity telethon. Kermit and Pepe the Prawn then embarked on a promotional tour across London and took the opportunity to ride the London Eye.
We're here in London having a great time, aren't we, Pepe? Doing wonderful things all over town. Pepe, what are you doing?
I don't feel so good.
Just look out at the horizon and breathe. Yes, that's good. That's it. There's Big Ben back there. The house. You'll be fine.
The success of their latest film had finally put the Muppets back on the map, and much like the events of the movie, they were remembered fondly by the public for the first time in decades.
Welcome back to the National Television Awards!
The new film is exceptional. It's kind of, I love the Muppets anyway. I've always been a fan of the Muppets, but what I love about them is they tend to work for adults as well as for kids, but this is a film which is just about the perfect family film. I can't say enough good things about that movie. I just adored it, and if you don't go and see it, you've only got yourself to blame.
So, of course, a follow-up was made in the form of 2014's Muppets Most Wanted, and much like The Great Muppet Caper back in the 80s, this sequel was also filmed in Britain and underperformed at the box office. The film's climax sees a heist at the Tower of London, for which the Crown Estate granted the Muppets exclusive access to the actual tower for filming. In 2015, the Muppets starred in an advertisement for Warburton's, which is an English bakery company established in 1876, basically they make bread, and have had many crossover adverts featuring celebrities such as Robert De Niro, Samuel L. Jackson and Peter Kay. This campaign features a huge cast of Muppets singing a rendition of the Muppet Show theme song based around Warburton's crumpets, with lines like,
"We'll eat them with a couple watching Coronation Street,"
being something you wouldn't expect to hear from the distinctly American Muppets. The Muppets Take the O2 was a 2018 live show that took place at the O2 Arena in London. Kermit was reacquainted with Kylie, whilst former Doctor Who stars David Tennant and Peter Davison also made guest appearances. It acted as a follow-up to The Muppets Take the Ball in Hollywood the previous year, with the show being adapted for the UK as a result of its popularity. In the lead up to the show, Miss Piggy and Kermit were interviewed on Blue Peter, though Kermit is at this point being performed by Matt Vogel.
This Friday and Saturday, the Muppets will be performing our first ever live full-length show here in the UK. We're going to have celebrity guests, musical numbers, Muppet Labs, Pigs in Space, The Electric Mayhem.
Many of the same acts were retained, though some were altered to reference the local culture, with perhaps the most notable being a crossover with Doctor Who. Now, later this same year, something unusual happened. UK broadcaster Giles Brandreth owned a teddy bear museum in Yorkshire that allegedly housed the original Fozzie Bear that he claimed was given to him by Jim Henson back in the 80s.
I met him in a television studio in London, and he knew I had a bear collection. He said, "Would you like the original Fozzie?" And I said, "I'd love the original Fozzie." And he duly arrived, this huge Fozzie bear in a box, and it is the original Fozzie.
The story quickly spread online due to how bizarre and unlikely it seemed, before eventually reaching none other than Frank Oz himself, who responded, "Please explain to me in detail how Jim gave Fozzie to you, because I assure you that could not have happened." But, it did. Giles went on to explain that in 1988, Jim Henson was a guest on the breakfast television show that he was presenting. Brandreth later told Henson that he owned a teddy bear museum, which included artifacts such as a Winnie the Pooh blessed by the real Christopher Robin. Henson responded that the Muppets owed so much to Britain that he would love to see his original Fozzie Bear on show in England. Therefore, he would be happy to give Giles Fozzie to display with the rest of the collection. Now, Frank Oz still didn't believe that Henson would have done such a thing, so had a Muppet archivist search for evidence to back up the story, and lo and behold, they produced documentation confirming that the gift had been made. Oz promptly apologised to Brandreth, and we now have confirmation that the original Fozzie Bear from The Muppet Show resides at the Brandreth Bear House in North Yorkshire, as a thank you to Great Britain from Jim Henson himself. Nowadays, there are little homages to the Muppets' British heritage here and there, such as Uncle Deadly sporting a badge denoting him as from Boreham Wood, England, at a recent D23 expo. But the connection isn't something that's common knowledge, so it's been really interesting to dive into. In 2023, when Kermit appeared at the King's coronation waving a Union Jack, I was taken aback as to why he was there. You know, I knew the Muppets were popular in the UK, but I had no idea just how much their history was intertwined with ours, and now it all makes sense.
We sincerely hope you and the frog have enjoyed yourselves.
The relationship between the Muppets and Great Britain has been a mutually beneficial one that's lasted almost half a century. But I think the main takeaway from all this is that Lou Grade gave Jim Henson a chance when nobody else did. He provided the Muppets with a platform that they in turn would use to entertain not only the British public, but the entire world. In the Muppet movie, the characters are wary of this imposing cigar-smoking figure, but as it transpires, he's the answer to all their prayers. In retrospect, this was Henson's way of conveying his own story. He was no doubt intimidated by Lou Grid and terrified by the prospect of moving to another country, all in aid of an outlandish dream. But despite this, he persevered, and we're still talking about him today. So I'm sure there's a positive message in there somewhere.